Hi everyone, I'm Miriam Shavir from Brainstorm Digital, and I'm here with two other agency owners from across the world. I'm based in the UK, and I've got Graydon Ursell from Forever Booked in Canada and Spencer Wight from Ad Labs in LA. So we are truly across the ocean. And today we're going to focus on one of our services, which is SEO, which is what Spencer does. So we can't wait to hear all about it. Graydon, you're going to kick us off with the first question for Spencer.
Yeah, for sure, Spencer. So I'm just curious, like, I know you have an agency called Ad Lab, and you work with medical practices and medical spas and plastic surgeons, and you focus on SEO. Could you maybe explain like your overall strategy for SEO and how you get results for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the very cool introduction, guys. So SEO is a really interesting topic because there's a lot that goes into it. We could talk for hours and hours and hours and bore you to absolute tears, but we're not going to do that today. I'm going to try to sum it up in a real short and sweet kind of little package, so you can walk away and kind of understand what the basics of SEO are and what it is that we kind of offer and why we offer it that way. Because obviously, we want to focus on the most high impact parts of SEO that can be done the fastest. And we don't want to work on the tedious little tiny things that are going to take years or months to implement, just because, we want to gain traction as soon as possible. So a few of the elements in SEO, or at least one way to think of SEO in the beginning, is really anything that the search engines look at and kind of like, right? And there's reasons that these search engines might like these things. So what is a search engine? You know them: Google, Bing, Yahoo. There's a ton of other ones you probably have never heard of. There's DuckDuckGo that's up and coming. We don't spend too much time on those tertiary softwares or platforms, but instead we focus on the big ones because they're the ones that set the trend. So most people use Google. We typically go by Google standards for the most part. So on Google, what we have to remember with SEO, and this is going to help guide you in understanding almost anything about SEO, we have to understand how the platforms think. This goes for social media platforms and other things outside of SEO as well. But it's really, really important to think about how Google's incentives are set up so that SEO actually becomes something that is really actually just a set of standards that they have. So when we're talking SEO, we get into the mindset of thinking, all right, so Google has these landing pages. These landing pages are what we know as the search platform, right? So we go to google.com and we have the little search bar, and they always change the fun little picture, right? That's their way of kind of helping you not be bored when you come back as a consumer. They try to make it fun and interesting. And you type something in there, and the results that come up, they have an incentive to kind of vet those results, right? Because we, again, stepping into Google's shoes, we have to think about where they're coming from and what their incentives are, which would be advertising revenue. So if majority of their revenue comes from ad revenue, well, people have to have a reason to come back. And the guiding psychology here is, well, if Google showed a result that was not related to something that you searched, would you go back? Probably not. You probably wouldn't go back. Or you might try it once or twice or three times. But if you're searching for aesthetic centers or medical spas or any one of these things, and you come up with dentists, eventually you might be like, I'm going to try Bing or a different platform. So that's what they're competing against, right? And that's the guiding principle. So
basically you're saying that Google has an incentive to serve up the most accurate possible results. Is that right?
Yes. And with that, what comes is everything you can think of, from website to your offsite reputation. So a couple of services that are kind of the first go-tos, the things you want to look at first for SEO. If honestly, for any local business, we're talking local mainly right now because e-commerce is another animal. You're kind of up against Amazon there. So for local businesses, a few things that you would not maybe think of as SEO, but actually technically are, would be reviews. So are you generating them? Do you have a mechanism, a way of actually generating new reviews for yourself? Are they positive, right? You can learn a little bit about your business there too, because hopefully majority of them are positive. if you're seeing a negative trend, you actually may need to address a couple things inside your business. So reviews are, I would say, one of the first areas to address in SEO that most people wouldn't think about because they wouldn't consider it a piece of SEO. Most people go directly to the website and things like that, but we want to address where people are coming from and how they're vetting us. So
what's your best technique for generating those reviews?
Yeah, so believe it or not, a lot of EMR systems, so your medical record systems and how you're booking your appointments in your offices, if we're talking medical practices, typically there's a review type system already built in. So kind of the first go-to thing that you can do is explore that system with your rep and find out what its capabilities are and implement that into an email sequence. So when someone's come in for the third time or whatever it is, and you kind of know that they're having a positive experience overall with you, you can actually drip out an email that you have pre-templated, and that would generate you a new review. So does that answer your question, Miriam?
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. So that's kind of the first area. Now I don't want to go too long here. So there's a couple other things I want to jump through. Miriam, do you have any guiding questions that you could ask that could dig deep?
Yeah, first of all, I want to understand what are the major mistakes that that clinics and med spas make with their SEO?
Fantastic question. So major mistakes are, number one, typically lacking a lot of content. What I see with aesthetic centers especially is that they'll lump all of their services onto one single page, or all of their treatment types or what they treat on one single page. And that's a huge issue for SEO because the search engines cannot lump out that information. It kind of looks at the page and says, wait, it's all on one page. What is this page about? Because they have tools and mechanisms to actually digest a single page at a time. And the deeper you go on one single topic for these pages will actually help it do better in SEO when it's content centric or topic centric. So one treatment per page, and then you can extrapolate that out. You want a good amount of content on each one of those pages. And that's probably the first place I would start, and one of the major mistakes that most practices are making.
Yeah,
Okay. I got
sorry, go ahead and go on.
So that's like one mistake that people make like often with their SEO. On that same topic, like are there any, if like a medical practice owner is listening to this, is there any quick fixes that they could do by themselves to get them just like instant results?
Yeah, so are you talking about the content pages or a different topic?
I would say SEO in general, but sure, if it has to do with just the content on the page, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the two things I would address immediately, again, we already mentioned the reviews, so I would jump on that, but I would also look at what's called your Google My Business. Most aesthetic centers and practices do know that those exist. They don't know to the extent of the content you can add to them, though. So you can add pictures and videos, and one of the things Google works off of is a lot of video search and picture search, right? So a lot of people, you go to the top and you search Botox or whatever it might be, and you hit images up there. Well, guess what? That becomes images. That becomes a categorized version of images that are on people's websites. So you want to make sure that, and that's a little unrelated to GMB, but it has to do with that search and also map search, Google Map search. So when someone types in Botox near me, those images also can kind of play into the factor of being seen on Google, Google My Business, and Google Maps and Google.com, and that will drive traffic immediately. So I would add images, pictures, videos, and I would try to deal with some content, but that might be getting a little deeper.
Spencer, one thing that I've noticed, by the way, about the biggest mistakes, obviously we don't do SEO at all. We are email marketing specialists for med spas. But when we do talk to clinic owners about their marketing, SEO is very often an area that they try to do by themselves. And whenever I hear that, I kind of hold my head in my hands, because actually it always hits me that SEO, of all the things that our agencies do, SEO is something that is actually so specialist. It sounds to me like, oh yeah, we can generate some reviews, but actually it involves a massive amount of understanding Google's algorithms. And what's your response when you hear people, clinic owners, trying to do this themselves?
Yeah, it's usually a combination of cringing and also questioning what they think SEO is, because the reality is it's a very vast topic, and you could argue that social media is a form of SEO. So it's such a deep topic that it can almost bleed into absorbing other concepts, other platforms, other approaches. And so, yeah, that's typically my reaction though, is to get into question mode and ask, what do you think SEO is?
Well, why do you think people make that mistake? Why do you think they try to do it themselves?
It's a combination of things. One reason I could say right away is the fact that a lot of companies have been burned. So they're investing in an SEO company or an SEO agency that's going to help them, rise to the first position on Google, because that seems to be a lot of what SEO companies will push. We'll get you to position number 1. They're not realistic about it. We want to get you to page 1 of Google and as close to number 1 as possible. But the algorithms are changing every single day. So that's kind of my reasoning and response behind it. And I try to guide them immediately to understand that this is a very deep topic and that there's a lot of moving parts to it, and the algorithm is changing as well. So you have to stay on top of what is actually best for Google. And again, that's when we slip back into the mindset of, what does Google want? What are their incentives? What are they incentivized to provide to their users? And then you kind of extrapolate it out to what the user wants as well. And you can start to understand what SEO is. Most practices just aren't equipped to think that way. Just to get into that mindset alone and then understand the different pieces of SEO, that's a full-time job. And you're running a medical practice. So you don't really have time for that.
And how important is SEO in general for a practice? Because when I think of SEO, I think of it as a very long-term kind of strategy. So realistically, what kind of impact can that have on a med spa or on an aesthetic clinic?
Yeah, it can have a huge impact over time. Now, the first element of SEO that does have a large impact are reviews. So reviews can be generated actually very quickly from existing client or patient databases. But after that is said and done, there's not a ton that you can do in the SEO realm besides optimizing some content. It does take time, because what Google does is they look at your content. Let's say you refresh it. Let's say you had services all on the same page and you separated them out. Well, they're going to take a relook at your website, which they consistently do on a regular basis anyway. And let's say that they like your new layout, your new website, your new whatever it is. Well, it's not automatic where you just get all these new rankings. So what happens is they allow it to start dripping out more and more. If that makes sense, you start coming up in the search results more and more. And as that happens, your impressions go up. So the amount of people seeing it goes up, but the clicks don't go up necessarily. You want the clicks to follow, but oftentimes they won't. You'll see the impressions starting to rise. The clicks won't necessarily follow at the same rate as you were getting the clicks before, when people are searching for your business or your services. And after the impressions rise, that's kind of Google giving you the ability to prove yourself. And that takes time. So it's like building any reputation. I would say minimum of 9 months to a year is where you're really going to start to see a curve that you can understand, because we have a lot of data, we have a lot of charts, we have a lot of graphs provided directly by Google. These are not third-party tools, and they tell you exactly what Google is seeing on your brand. So super important, but it takes time.
And with SEO, are you optimizing for particular phrases like you would in Google Ads, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you typically want to decide on some sort of keyword strategy. These are the keywords that you're pushing to rank for. You got to do a lot of research, and there's a lot of different methods, of course, that you can plug and play into this idea of what you want to target. So we have some proprietary methods that we run that are kind of based on some local cities around you, where we'd only rank you in your local city for those keywords. So a keyword might be literally Botox near me. Probably wouldn't necessarily rank for that specific one, because Botox typically is not the primary service that a medical spa wants to push. So it's going to depend, but we typically start with the keywords that you want to push, the services you want to push, and then some long tail forms of some other things around that. Medical spa near me, aesthetic center near me, and keywords centered around that. And then we'll add city names to that too. So Aesthetic Center, Westlake Village, California, and we can rank for those as well. And we kind of weed those into the content, and then offsite strategies.
Spencer, thank you so much. That was fascinating insight into SEO specifically for aesthetic clinics and for med spas. This is Spencer Wight from AdLab in California, and I'm Miriam Shabib at Brainstorm Digital in the UK, specialist in email marketing for aesthetic clinics and for med spas. And here we have Braden Ursell from Forever Booked, who is a specialist in SMS marketing for aesthetic clinics and med spas. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the next edition of our videos, where we'll be focusing on another service for this industry, and we're looking forward to seeing you there.